I'm Paul Martino. I run a fund called Bullpen, and it was a real hoot to see Brett Wilson up there. I wrote him his original angel check back in 2005. So, you know, once you're in this business a long time, you get to do that. I must say, having sat in your seat for many years on the other side, I did 4 companies. It's cool when you get to come back and have that kind of experience, and I hope 20 years from now you get to do the same thing. I'm here with Marcelo, who's the CEO of Ipsy, which is, I think, one of the most undertold stories of success in Silicon Valley. He's gone to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and hardly ever raised a penny. He was one of the real pioneers of using YouTube celebrities for his product line. And I'm thrilled I got him out to talk a bit about it because he's a bit of a reticent guy. But the story you're going to hear from Marcelo through some Q&A here is pretty remarkable.
Well,
so
thank
Marcelo,
you,
tell us about yourself. Tell us how you got Ipsy going back in the day.
Well, first of all, Paul, thanks for inviting me. And of course, I would be here for Paul because he was one of our best, most value-added investors. And also, I always enjoy spending time with him.
Thank you.
He's very much against hipsters, so I try to find the most hipster outfit I could find at home. I don't usually dress like this, but I figured for Paul, I would make an exception.
Love it.
Anyways, what's your question, Paul?
Let's go back to 2011. You're starting Ipsy. Tell us your background a little bit, who you are, and how you figured out something that nobody else could see. So talk a little bit about what that was like, knowing that you were on to something that everyone was going to miss.
Yeah, I think the perspective I came at it, as much as you might believe it, I don't come from the beauty industry. I come more from the media side, and before that, I was on the investing side as well. And so the background, how I saw this evolving, the place that I saw this from was really a media perspective. So I saw that influence in beauty was completely shifting. It was completely getting democratized from, hey, we've got, you know, the traditional media companies, they're getting together with all the brand conglomerates and with the retailers. We're all going to get together 3 times a year, and this is what's going to be cool this year. And these are going to be the seasons. And this is going to be about red lipstick, and it's going to be about, you know, the next one's going to be about contouring, and the next one's going to be about, you know, some hair products. And all of a sudden, all these women in their bedrooms, really with a camera, were changing that paradigm. And they were much more influential than all of these multi-billion-dollar companies. And really, that's what I saw in 2011 when I met Michelle Phan. I was already working with YouTube personalities at the time. I was fortunate to meet Michelle, and she was just the inspiration for all of this, because she realized a little bit of what she was doing, but it was her and thousands of other women were really changing the face of beauty, and they were changing it away from one that was really monolithic to one that was much more about, hey, this is my perspective, and you can follow it or not, and much more, you know, democratized and niche. So that's, I think it was just a combination of, it was really me coming outside of the beauty industry that allowed me to see that, and because it's always, media leads in terms of some of these industry changes, and so the fact that I came from media, I think, helped me see at least a little bit of it. I didn't see the full story back then because I didn't know enough about the beauty industry of how big the change was going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of times when you're the trailblazer in the new industry, it requires you not to be from the industry to see it. I saw that Mark Pincus spoke here yesterday, the founder of Zynga, and one of the things I remember about the early days of Zynga was he was a social networking guy. I had started Tribe Network with him. He was not a game guy. That was actually the secret to the success of the company. If he was a game guy, he would have never built the company that way. So tell us about your background when you start Ipsy. What were you doing before that kind of gave you this, wow, I'm going to go disrupt the whole beauty industry background?
Sure. So I was part of the team that started Funny or Die. A lot of you may be familiar with that company. It was actually, we were based pretty close to here. We were based in San Mateo, even though everybody thought we were in LA. And it was started by Will Ferrell and Adam McKay. And I joined right at the beginning to lead all of the business side of what they were doing. And through that, I started seeing all these YouTube personalities. Probably in 2009, I started seeing these YouTube personalities that were getting bigger and bigger than the traditional celebrities. And nobody was paying attention to them. YouTube was a big platform, but even YouTube didn't, in some ways, pay attention to their own personalities. And so I sent an email to probably the top 40 comedians at the time on YouTube. This would never happen now, but back then, every single one of them got back to me and emailed me back. And I try to meet with as many of them as possible and try to learn, hey, how do you make this work? What's going on here? And try to eventually get them to work with Funny or Die and our partner who was CAA, who was a big agency in LA. And they didn't want to work with them. They didn't want to work with these YouTube personalities because they said, Will thought they weren't funny, CAA thought that they weren't talented. And I was like, well, that might be the case, but there's something very special there. And so I left Funny or Die to start a company called Real Influence. That was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with FameBit, but it was almost exactly what FameBit eventually did, but this was probably 2 or 3 years before. And it didn't work as a platform, but it allowed me to build relationships with all these YouTube personalities, not just in comedy, but of course in beauty and in other places. So that's how I got into it.
And in some ways, you did this a little bit outside of what I would call the whole Silicon Valley way. You did do a small venture round, which we participated in, but you only really raised $2 million in venture and a pretty non-traditional syndicate. So you stayed a bit under the radar in doing this. And one of the amazing statistics about the company, I'll brag on Marcelo's behalf, he got to $100 million in revenue and only ever raised $2 million. This is not a very typical Silicon Valley story. And tell us a little bit about how you were able to do that. I mean, being that capital efficient is a pretty neat trick.
Well, I think the number one way that we were able to do that is just need, desperation. So we weren't able to raise any more money. So, Paul probably knows this because this happens to him all the time, I imagine. We thought we were ready maybe for a bigger round and $5 million round. $10 million round, who knows? And I think people didn't understand our story very well. Well, frankly, we didn't explain it very well. We didn't have the traction that we needed to get that round going. And so at the same time, we were pretty thrifty with how we grew the company. So we had been profitable from, at least on a cash flow perspective, from day one. I think I wrote the company a $13,000 check to start the business, and it never really needed any more money. So we've always had more money in the bank account.
Remember, that's a pretty cool way to do it. You're not going to hear that too often.
And I didn't have a lot of money, so I asked the company to pay me back at some point. I need those $13,000 back. But we went and tried to raise a more traditional round. We really realized pretty quickly we weren't ready for it. And we found an alternative group of investors, one of which probably Paul specializes in these sorts of rounds, or at least used to specialize. And they saw something special in the company. And so it wasn't really, the reason that we went with a smaller round was not because we necessarily wanted to, although it ended up being the right thing for the company. And the way that we were able to get to $100 million with very little capital was one, just need, right? So we were super, super focused. While our competitors were expanding and doing all kinds of different things, we're like, we got something really, really good with our glam bag. How do we grow that? And how do we focus on what's important to us, which is our community and the creators that we work with on YouTube, and then by then Instagram was growing. And so real just focus is, I think, the number one way that we were able to do it.
It's pretty interesting, too, the reception among the venture community of the guy from Funny or Die and a former cocktail waitress now making YouTube videos wasn't exactly the same as the AI students coming out of the Stanford AI lab. And what's interesting about that is that your audience and following at that time of the round had tens of millions of people. So if you had asked any 14-year-old girl here at the high school right across the street about Ipsy, they would have told you everything you need to know about the company. But you go up and down Sand Hill Road, nobody had any idea who you were.
Yes.
And you had this massive following. So did you ever find that kind of odd that you could go into certain rooms and literally tens of millions of people know who you are, but you'd go talk to a couple people in Sand Hill and they go, why are you even doing this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when the whole fundraising thing, it's all a game. And once you realize that there's all kinds of rules, fortunately, nobody tells you the rules. They're not written anywhere. But once you understand the game, it's not that anything I find frustrating anymore. Right. At the time, I found it confusing. But and upsetting because we needed the money, or we thought we did. But I think in terms of now, if I could go back and think about what happened, I mean, I don't think that it was a surprise. If I had to go back and advise myself 5 years ago, I would be like, don't even try because you don't have the right story, or tell the story in a different way, or play the game in a different way. And once you understand those rules, then everything's easier. Now, there's people who play outside those rules, like Paul. So you can always try to find somebody who has a different perspective. But I would say, VCs are very, very smart, but they're also kind of all followers. And so finding somebody who's different, it can be very valuable.
Yeah, there is a lot of groupthink in my business. I was a 4-time CEO before I joined the venture side, and if I have one frustration with most of the other firms, it's the level of groupthink. It's actually kind of surprising. Yeah. You fund disruption, but yet you yourselves kind of have very narrow filter bubble that you live in. We try our best not to do that, but it's sometimes difficult. So you told a funny story about, back in the day in 2009, you sent 30 comedians mail and said, 30 of them got back to you. Obviously, now the YouTube celebrities understand they have Q ratings that can rival Tom Hanks. They probably didn't know what those words even meant back then. So how are you continuing to find this awesome pipeline of talent now that the YouTube celebrities know how valuable they actually are? You had to change your game along the way, because at some point, the people you were making celebrities were already celebrities now. So tell us a bit about that process.
Well, I mean, so now we're on our 4th, what we call batch of different YouTube creators. Now they're not YouTube creators anymore. They're, they have bigger followers on Instagram than they do, and Facebook than they do on YouTube and Snapchat. And so what we try to do from the beginning is how do we build a system around these creators so that we're not dependent on any one creator, and they're going to change over time. The platforms are going to change over time. So the value that we can create here is building a system where we help grow them, so more of a studio system. And so that's really, we start with creators when they have less than 100,000 followers across all their platforms. And now we've grown 11 of them to over 1 million followers. After they're on 3 years exclusive agreements with us. And after the 3rd year, they go and they can make millions of dollars. It's great if they're successful, and that's great for them. But it's also great for us because we can find new talent, we can help grow them, and it's a very symbiotic relationship. But that's one of the hardest things that we've done is how do you build the contracts? How do you build the system? We have 50 people that work in Santa Monica that are looking for talent, helping talent grow on the programming side. And so it's a whole, it's not as easy as one thing. It's really part of our secret sauce. And it's not that it's secret, it's just that it's hard, actually.
Yeah, and you've built a really nice community around the celebrities as well. One of the things I was always taken by was people would get their glam bag, and then they'd watch the video of Michelle, and then they'd try and do the same thing themselves. They'd upload the video. Talk a bit about how that cycle works, where your ultimate customers really feel a kinship with the celebrities they're interacting with.
Yeah, no, that's what we try. We really think Ipsy's a company. It's a beauty company. We're not itself a community, but we're centered around a community, and we're centered around a community of creators. And that's really what makes our vision even possible, because we have huge competitors like Sephora and Ulta, and well, you name it. The beauty industry is huge. And so the reason that we have the potential to be here and continue growing is because we've tied ourselves very closely to this creator community. Creator community is defined by more of a mindset than it is by your numbers. And so, you have 13-year-old girls who love, and boys who love what they see online, and they're creating their own videos, and they're creating their own Instagrams. And, I think sometimes it goes overboard, so we try to do it in a way that it's not competitive and that everybody is it's a supportive community about self-expression, because otherwise we're becoming just like the system, the old system. Right. But yeah, we do encourage that community feel, and we encourage people who are maybe growing up in their career to become bigger. We have a whole system for it called Ipsy Open Studios, where we have 10,000 plus creators And we give them access to resources like our studio. We give them access to our blog where you can see how to pay your taxes as a creator, or Facebook Lives where they can interact with with kind of creators that have already not made it but gotten more up the ladder and can help them. And so there's a whole way that we encourage that community.
That's great. So tell me some exciting things. What's coming up from Ipsy in 2017?
Well, what's coming up now is we've become really good at discovery, and so and that's something that we've gotten better at really in the last year. So really personalizing your, I don't know, I'm glad to see a lot of women in the audience. So hopefully some of you are Ipsy subscribers. If you are, hopefully you've seen that personalization's gotten better. And that's a really tough problem, and that was really important because discovery is it's not really good discovery if you're not sending something that's good for you. And so as we've gotten better at that, we also, what we hear a lot is that people are buying a lot of the products that they find through Ipsy. In fact, 55% of what people buy after they become an Ipsy subscriber, they found it through Ipsy. Mm-hmm. And so connecting the dots all the way from that subscriber and that member to the brands that we work with, and in some ways, changing around the system so that there's not this retailer in the middle that's really not adding that much value. So that's really what we're working on.
That's great. So we'll do one more question, then we'll be able to open it up for a few questions for Marcelo. Last one for the group, though, goes like this. So you said the story about what you would have told yourself if you went back on the fundraising process. So we have a room full of entrepreneurs who want to be sitting in that seat a few years from now. So what are some pieces of advice you can give to them around what it's like to do something a little off the beaten path, a little bit crazy, as opposed to maybe something that's a more traditional startup kind of company? What are some advice you can give about being this kind of visionary trailblazer that I think you are?
Well, thanks. That's not how I would describe myself, but
especially not in that hat. But
yeah, not in this hat. I think actually most companies are like ours. It's probably the anomaly, the company that's venture funded in Silicon Valley. If you think of most startups around the world. And by the way, now I'm cheating because last year we raised a very big round, or 2015 we raised a very big round. But frankly, that was mostly secondary, so it's a totally different type of round.
Right.
But most companies are like ours. You kind of make it, and you make the right choices along the way. You make some wrong choices, and you start to kind of follow your own path. And I would say that it's really, I think it was really powerful for us to be able to have control the company among the management team, where we could think about things long term. We could make decisions like Paul's made fun of me along the way. I need to think about it the Marcelo way. I can't really give you advice otherwise, and that's fine. If that's how we want to do things, we want to do things in a way that we feel comfortable, and we don't have like, hey, in 4 years we need to get our investors out, or 8 years we need to do an IPO, or this or that. We're just trying to build something that is big, interesting for us, is super impactful, and is serving our customer and our community well. And so that's, I think, what I would encourage all of you. For some of you, it might make sense to go the venture-funded path, but there might be ways where you can find that nugget of insight that maybe doesn't come from the industry, that allows you to get your foot in the door, and then through that, continue to grow your company and invest in that thing that makes you special. And if you have a big enough industry, then your company will grow as you continue to focus on that. So I would say that's one of the things. And the other one is just an advice that Paul gave me once, which I thought was kind of like a fortune cookie type advice at the time, but it ended up, I think, being a good one, which is your job. I think Paul told me, Marcelo, your job as CEO is to make the right decisions. I'm like, that's really helpful, Paul. But I think, looking back at it, and I think maybe it is something that each one of us can take away different things from. But you kind of know those points in time that there's important strategic decisions, really thinking about them, not letting yourself get swayed by what other people say or think, and just making the right decisions. It's much harder to make them, and not because it's hard to analyze them. It's hard to make them because of all the external factors. And when I see a lot of companies, and then I talk to that went the wrong way, and I'm like, hey, just give you an example, fab.com. I'm like, well, why did you guys do this? And they kind of knew that that wasn't the right path for them to kind of open it up and start producing their own products. they just got pressured by whatever their investors, or in all these cases where I hear stories of companies that have gone the wrong way, it's like they knew what the right way to go was. They just got pressured to go in the wrong direction. So I think just making the right decisions, thinking about it, and that's, if you guys are founders and CEOs, that is your number one job, is like when there's a hard decision, thinking about it and making the right one.
Let's get a microphone, but I want to clarify one thing. The exact quote goes like this, and I learned it from my CEO coach, the late Bill Campbell. CEOs get paid for judgment. He drilled that into my head for a decade. And so Marcelo's interpretation of that's right. 3 or 4 times a year, you got to make a tough call. And if you make it wrong, your company's probably going to go under. So let's get a question or two in. Anybody? There we go.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for sharing your story. So I had 2 questions. First of all, is your market primarily the US? Or is it also you've got 13-year-old people in China and India, other places as customers, or 18-year-olds? And second of all, as Paul mentioned that he was talking to Bill for external advice, can you share a little bit about who's your sense of compass direction? Who's your personal board of advisors in helping you drive this company?
Yeah, worldwide is really our market, and it's I would say people think of our audience as being more 13 to 17-year-old, but really it's 18 to 34. That's the core audience, and it's just as much women who are 35 plus as it is below 18, and so and we do want to do a better job for women who are 35 plus, who sometimes we're not doing a great job of personalizing for right now. In terms of where, right now we're in the US and Canada, but we want to be worldwide. Sense of compass, I don't really, I just try to do what I think is right at the time. I don't really have somebody that I'm like, that's the person I'm trying to emulate.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, she's got the mic. You get the next one.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Mingju. Just want to thank you for being here. It's refreshing seeing another person in the beauty world like myself. So I actually have a small beauty startup, and I've worked with Ipsy Offers to launch both of our products so far.
Awesome.
So it's been amazing. And my question is sort of, it just kind of came to me just now. Do you have any aims to kind of do your Ipsy Studios model instead of for the creator, but for brands? It seems like a very natural progression to me, since you guys have really helped us catapult, just
yeah. It's an interesting idea. I think our brands are becoming creators themselves. So to that extent, I don't think we need 2 different models. Like, what's the name of your company?
The Brush Bar.
What, the Brush?
The Brush Bar.
The Brush Bar. Cool. So are you the founder of it?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'm sure you had some insight, and like there's some reason why. So I'd love to get you at the studio, and just like any other creator, in my mind, you're a creator. You just happen to be a creator that owns a brand, and so I don't think we need a different model for it. We just need to get people, and we do. We have, we've had Jessica Alba from Honest, or we've had Tony from Nick. We've had lots of different creators who've come to our studio, and they talk about what they're passionate about, which is usually their brands and their products. So that's on the studio front. What was the other question? Or?
Just wondering if you had plans to kind of help almost incubate brands, because I know through Ipsy Offers, a lot of smaller brands really get on the big stage.
Well, we're thinking about it actually. We've decided that we don't want to go into the brand. We're developing one brand ourselves, which is M, because we bought it from L'Oreal and it was started by Michelle Phan. We don't want to do any more of those. Hats off to you. It's really hard to do what you do. So we're thinking about it. We're thinking about some sort of incubation program where we can help you guys, and whether it's Ipsy Offers or the marketplace stuff that we're doing, and as well as the glam bag. And so yeah, we're definitely thinking about it. It's a good idea.
Unfortunately, we've got the hook, so come on, grab us real quick, and hopefully we can get your answer. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.